There is an epidemic affecting children everywhere. Comic books. Comics everywhere.
They're all reading comics.
Avengers, Batman, Wonder Woman, and they're in movies now, too. In the real world, there is no good and evil. Enough! I'm reading comics, and no one's gonna stop me.
I was trying to mimic what I was doing on screen, but I realized I filmed it with the wrong shirt on, so it no longer syncs with what I'm actually wearing. But welcome to this week's episode of Gil Reads Comics. Been a couple years since we did one of these. Today, Daniel, we're talking about Ultimate Spider-Man issue 1, which was just released today. A little bit of background on the Ultimate Marvel Universe. This was my jumping on point for reading Marvel. Ultimate Marvel was a sort of rebranding that happened back in the year 2000. This is going to sound familiar, but Marvel Comics had become very convoluted. They started decades ago, and it's been an ongoing continuity. So by the time you get to the year 2000, if you want to read Spider-Man, you go in with the knowledge that there's 40 to 50 years of storyline in the Spider-Man world that leads to this point. So they started a new imprint, kind of like Marvel Spotlight, called Ultimate Marvel, where they restarted a lot of these characters with fresh origin stories. There was Ultimate Spider-Man, Ultimate X-Men. You could pick up issue 1 with zero prior knowledge, and it was just one ongoing story, very easy to follow. And I loved Ultimate Spider-Man. I joined late in the game. It was a few years after it started, and I binged the whole comic in one weekend for hours. I was that hooked on it. Unfortunately, around 2015, Ultimate Marvel was killed. I guess the sales had gone down by that point. But what really bothered me at the time, and this is going to be the most nerdy complaining you've ever heard from me, but they feel the need to have an in-story explanation for the universe ending. It can't just be we're no longer going to print Ultimate Marvel comics and we're just not watching that universe anymore, but it still exists. They have to literally destroy the universe. So that's what they did, and only a few people survived it. Miles Morales, for example, he was in the Ultimate Marvel universe, and I think he gave a guy a hamburger, this like god, and as a thank you, he took Miles and implanted him into the Marvel universe, resurrected his mother, who was killed by, I think, Venom or Carnage, and basically brought all of his friends over. And then it's very unclear after that point if Miles remembers whether or not he's from another universe, because they essentially, what do you call it when you change something retroactively?
Retcon.
They retconned it. So it's like he's been part of the official Marvel universe this whole time. So at the time, that really pissed me off because it was heartbreaking. Not only did the Peter Parker I know and love die, but his entire universe, including every planet and solar system in that universe, eradicated. Another survivor of that universe was Reed Richards, but in this world, he became evil and took on the moniker The Maker because he wants to remake the world as he believes it should be. He's one of these villains that thinks he's doing the right thing, but always takes things too far. He's a Thanos-type villain. Thanos wasn't a bad guy. Hashtag Thanos was right. That's right, Tony. I saw what you were tweeting. So The Maker, one thing he wants to do is go back to the Ultimate Universe, which we haven't seen in years except for little glimpses here and there. He goes up to Miles Morales recently and he says, hey, I don't know if you remember, but you're from another universe. And Miles is like, yeah, of course I remember, but I don't want to go back. I'm happy here. So they set up this whole story. They set it up like they were going to bring back the Ultimate Universe, but then it turns out that the Maker goes to some other Earth we've never seen before. So Ultimate Marvel was Earth 1610, but the Maker went to Earth 6160. And in order to remake this world in his image, he travels through time and stops all the heroes from being created. For example, remember when Peter Parker got bit by a spider? Not in this universe. The Maker kills that spider. Well, actually, he doesn't kill it. He just takes it away so it doesn't bite Peter. He goes to kill Captain America, before he gets unfrozen, but he actually can't find him. He delays the launch of the ship so it doesn't go into the cosmic storm. Therefore, the Fantastic Four are never created. So that all took place in a story called Ultimate Invasion. Very cool story, very convoluted. The long and short of it is we have a new universe. We're calling it the Ultimate Marvel Universe. And in this world, none of the heroes were created the way you're familiar with. But Tony Stark to the rescue, Daniel. He says, I'm going to fix this, because he found out about all this stuff happening. So he snuck into a facility where all the little trinkets are being kept. The spider that would have bit Peter and all the other totems that would have created various superheroes are stored in this vault. They get them back and they give them back to all the heroes so they can create, Peter Parker, Spider-Man, and everybody. Then the Maker finds out about this, and his council, they're not happy about that. So they frame Tony Stark for a terrorist attack on New York City. A bunch of people get killed. And then we get to Ultimate Spider-Man. So, very convoluted mess, but the TLDR is that we're in a new universe where none of the heroes became heroes, and there was recently a terrorist attack being blamed on Tony Stark. And some of the people... Yeah, go ahead.
The Maker went back in time, though, to prevent Tony Stark from ever giving those artifacts to everybody?
No.
So how did he, undo it?
The Maker just stopped superheroes from being created naturally. So the spider was going to bite Peter. The Maker went back in time, grabbed that spider, put it in a vault. Now, Tony trapped the Maker, so he's stuck. While he's stuck, he went behind his back, took the spider, and gave it back to Peter in the present.
Oh, okay. So that happened, and then and then Tony Stark gets framed for the terrorist attack.
Yeah. So while the Maker is, let's say, behind bars, he's trapped. His council is still out there doing his bidding. They're kind of like the Illuminati, and they try and take out Tony. So they think they killed him, and at the same time, they framed him for this terrorist attack to tarnish his image in the public. So now everyone thinks Tony's a bad guy, and a bunch of people died, including May Parker and Harry Osborn's parents. So it sets up a whole new status quo for this reboot. Okay, are you with me?
I'm following.
All right, awesome.
Okay, well, I'm a little confused.
Okay.
So
that was kind of how Gil Reads Comics usually went. It was usually me ran. And when we first started, the format was that the other person didn't read the comic. So it was literally just me explaining it to them. And so people were just confused all the time. But the problem is, and this is, I'll say, one of my criticisms up front for this new Ultimate imprint, you're kind of hurting yourself by, again, feeling the need to explain the reboot in continuity. Like, you can just say, there's a new universe, we never saw it before, we're going to start telling some fresh stories there. But they try to explain it in this really convoluted way. And to their credit, I mean, you picked up Ultimate Spider-Man #1. You didn't know any of this backstory. And for the most part, you could follow it, right?
Yeah, excuse me. Yes. And I liked it.
There's an argument to be made that I should have skipped all of this preamble and we could have just said, here's the 2 or 3 things you need to know. Let's get started.
Okay, wait, so here's my confusion. And I thought there was some time travel involved, because even this panel you're showing here, why would a teenage boy commit this terrible act? So it's like a young Tony Stark that does the terrorist attack.
In this continuity, Tony is a teenager right now.
Even when he goes and gets all the artifacts, he did that as a teenager. He got the artifacts back and gives them to the heroes?
Yes. In the convoluted Ultimate Invasion backstory, there's a lot of time travel involved. Howard Stark was Iron Man, and his teenage son, after Howard gets killed, he takes on the mantle of Iron Lad because he doesn't want to steal his father's superhero moniker. There's a lot of time travel involved, but all you have to know is that at this point in the present, Tony Stark is a teenager.
Okay. I'm still a little confused, but we'll get into the issue, and then I'll raise my confusion when we get there.
I think you know enough. And just to correct everybody else's confusion, Tony has a very important question. Does Megan the Stallion twerk in this new timeline? Is She-Hulk canon? So I don't know if you remember, Tony, watching the show Lost, where they talked about a constant, where it's sort of a thing that's constant in every timeline. This is a nexus point. This happens in every timeline, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Marvel would be crazy to do otherwise. You think they're trying to just self-destruct the brand? In fact, I think you insulted their intelligence by even asking that question. All right, can we please get into Ultimate Spider-Man now? Okay, let's go through the story, and then we'll talk about what we thought, but feel free to interrupt as we go. So first off, Ultimate Spider-Man issue 1 just released today. It's a very dialogue-heavy story, which is very welcoming. This is kind of what I wanted out of Echo, where Marvel Spotlight is like pumping the brakes after things have become so complicated and convoluted. I had the same feeling here, because in preparation for reading this, I read all the Ultimate Invasion, Ultimate Universe stuff leading up to it. So messy. And it was such a breath of fresh air to get an issue 40 pages with very little, maybe even no action, with one or two exceptions. So that was pretty refreshing. A lot of it is just a character work and setting up the status quo. So we have a middle-aged Peter Parker married to Mary Jane, which fans of Spider-Man have missed because Peter made a deal with Mephisto many years ago to erase their marriage, and people have been very upset that they aren't married. But here they are, and they have 2 children that seem very nice. Go ahead, Daniel.
Major plot hole. No way Peter Parker gets MJ without the superpowers.
I think this is like a multiverse remnant thing where even though he doesn't have them, she can look into his eyes and see that there's something there. There's an itch that she can't wait to scratch.
All right, fair enough.
They're happily married, and here's the craziest part. Uncle Ben works for the Daily Bugle, and he's the managing editor. And right off the bat, it's so fun to read the issue and see all the little things and big things that are different from the world we know to this one. It's the fun of What If, but it's more than that, because I have not been a fan of the What If series, because the entire show is just about the curiosity of what would happen if this were different. And then it's like a montage of events. It's trying to compress an entire story into 20 minutes, like what we talked about with The Mandalorian. But this is actually a story taking its time, and the what if fun aspect of it is just one part of the fun, but it's also just an engaging story on its own.
What's it say in the back of that headline? Roxxon leads attack on Daily Bugle?
Yeah, Roxxon is some kind of science company. I remember in Ultimate Spider-Man, and Tony, if you read Ultimate Spider-Man, I saw you said you still have volume 1. Feel free to jump in here. But I think a lot of the Venom, a lot of the lizard stuff, anytime it was science gone awry, it would somehow connect back to Roxxon. Kind of like an Oscorp. So they keep mentioning some event coming up this afternoon. And one other thing that's different in this world is that J. Jonah Jameson seems like a pretty great guy. Right here, he's telling Uncle Ben, hey, we've got an important meeting. I know you need some time this afternoon. If you need me to push it back. And of course, Uncle Ben gruffly tells him, I'm going to be fine. I'll be back on time. He doesn't talk about his feelings, you know? And there's some other nice character moments. Peter Parker is going to the same event. Right here, you see J. Jonah Jameson offers him a tie out of nowhere.
I loved this stuff. Seeing J. Jonah Jameson be like all sentimental and nice to Peter Parker and being like buddy with Ben. I really thought that was so funny.
And they set it up.
And heartwarming.
Yes. They set it up so he's screaming like, Parker! And then he sees Peter and he's like, oh, hey, Peter. Then he yells Parker again. You find out he's yelling at Ben. And then you think he's mad at him. And he's like, why are you yelling? He's like, so you can hear me. So they set it up that you think he's going to be the same jerk. And then they turn it around. But you still see flashes. Oh, go ahead.
I was really impressed at this point. Like, I've not read that many comics. but usually like there was actually like good character development here. Like I so quickly got bought into these characters, even though they're not the characters I've known before. Like they actually do such a good job. It's actually dialogue heavy and really engaging. It was awesome.
I
really
looked up
enjoyed
some
this.
reviews, and some of the complaints were, don't go into this one expecting any Spidey action. It's all dialogue. Get your reading glasses. But I've realized that people come to comics for very different reasons. There are some people who come for the artwork. I am someone who always reads them for story. And for me, the artwork, the closer it can just look to real people, the happier I am. I remember at one point in the Ultimate Spider-Man run, they replaced the artist, and it went from looking somewhat realistic, not real, it was still cartoony, but at least the dimensions and the proportions seemed real. It suddenly became very cartoony. And to me, that's like if you're watching a show and suddenly they recast all the characters. So I was a fan of this issue. Oh yeah, and I was going to say, you do see flashes of the old J. Jonah Jameson, where later on there's a conversation between Ben and Jonah, where they talk about the truth in journalism. And Jonah just starts laughing hysterically, which was great because I started laughing too, just at the idea of journalists telling the truth. And he's like, let's just agree. Okay, we're not going to tell the truth. Let's just agree we're not going to lie. And that felt like something the old Jonah would have said. What is the event they were talking about? It was a memorial service for all the people who were lost in Tony's terrorist attack. You get a speech from Father Murdoch, apparently a priest in this world. So Daniel, that's Matt Murdock.
Oh, I didn't realize.
And his Catholicism has always been an important part of his character. So in this world, he's gone even further in that direction.
Interesting.
You also get a speech from Harry Osborn, who lost his parents, and a very touching moment. You can easily miss it. Uncle Ben sheds a tear while he talks.
I missed that. I mean, they mentioned it later, and I was surprised. I was like, why didn't I see that?
Yeah, MJ says, I've never seen Uncle Ben cry before. And I was like, me neither. Wait a minute. And then I go back and I saw it. They go back to the office, and tell me if I understood this correctly. It seems like Kingpin is one of the investors in the Daily Bugle, and he's trying to take a more active role to basically tell them what they can and can't publish. In particular, he seems upset about the way they've been going after Tony and all this reporting. So he's going to take over, and Jonah's not going to have that. He's not going to have somebody handcuffing him, telling him what to say in the news. He quits. They offer the job to Uncle Ben. He also quits.
Prediction: Fisk is actually working for the Maker, maybe through an intermediary, and that's why he doesn't want the Bugle digging too much into those events.
It would very much fit in what we saw in the comics before this one. Like I said, the Maker's Council is this sort of Illuminati-esque group where every war in the world is their doing because they believe that peace is impossible. Humans have it in their nature to fight. So you have to basically just pick a country to sacrifice. They're going to be the bad guys. Okay, next go around, you're going to be the bad guys. Representatives from every country are there. The Hulk is on the council, by the way. But in this universe, he's a very meditative Hulk that has his anger under control.
Are the Makers, are they all human?
Well, the Maker himself is human. The Maker's Council, do you consider the Hulk human? Right, so they're all human, but
no, I don't know why I thought it was like aliens, the Makers or something. Okay, they're just humans.
And there's no thing called the Makers, plural. There's the Maker, Reed Richards, and then he has his council.
Okay, wait, and go back one slide. The other thing, some of these speeches, like Harry Osborn's speech, very dark, very touching. Like I really did not expect that out of a comic.
I got a lump in my throat at certain parts of the comic.
It was really sad.
That's
really
a very,
sad.
very rare thing for me to feel emotionally moved by a comic. It's happened here and there. And I went into this with somewhat low expectations because I was pretty disappointed when I found out they were setting up that the Ultimate Universe that I knew and loved was coming back. Then at the last second, they pulled the switcheroo where actually it's a different universe. So I went in with a bit of a chip on my shoulder, and I was very pleasantly surprised. So, Kingpin, they quit. And then, Daniel, this is the one part of the issue that felt a little just kind of out of nowhere to me. Kingpin's leaving, and then someone blows up his car. Who did it? It looks like some kind of a Green Goblin-ish thing. But if you look closely, it says Oscorp Mark something on his shoulder. So it seems like an Iron Man-inspired Green Goblin. I would assume this is Harry Osborn. And it makes me wonder if Tony Stark is going throughout time to try and give the heroes back the things which made them heroes. I mean, this looks like Iron Man tech. Did he go to Harry Osborn and give him the Green Goblin suit?
Oh, okay. So he was going throughout time to hand out the artifacts. That was my confusion.
Well, no. Sorry, I shouldn't have said that. He's not like going back in time. So like he's not going back and making sure Peter Parker becomes Spider-Man when he was supposed to as a teenager. Yeah.
He's not doing that, but he is going to different times.
Maybe.
All right, we'll come back to it.
Don't quit. I don't like the way you're going after this story. I'm killing the story.
I quit. Wait, so did the Kingpin die in that slide?
That's what I thought. But if you look, I know this was a really convoluted. It's the one part of the issue that I had a problem with. But you see Kingpin in the bottom left corner, like a big blob. So I think he was getting out of the car. I assume he survived.
Okay.
You can't keep the Kingpin down.
There's no way.
All right, Green Goblin shows up. So Ben and Jonah, they meet for a drink. And within the course of like 2 or 3 hours, they get over the fact that they were essentially fired and decide they're going to start their own newspaper. And then Peter shows up, and he is got something weighing on him. He keeps talking about he's got this itch to do more with his life. And I could really feel this. So the way he's touching his heart right there, you know that feeling in your chest, that tug toward greatness, unrealized, the fear you're never going to reach your potential. But clearly
that
it's not
whisper in
just
the back of your head telling
Yes.
you got to start a YouTube channel.
Yeah, exactly. But you can tell this is not just some vague idea. There's something specific on his mind. He talks to Uncle Ben about it. He talks to Mary Jane about it. And they're very supportive. What's he talking about? Why is he so messed up? Because he got a visit from Tony Stark last night. He got a delivery, and then a hologram popped up where Tony Stark tells him everything. In this world, you were supposed to be a superhero, one of the best, named Spider-Man. But the spider that was supposed to bite you was stolen away by someone who stole your destiny. Well, buddy, here's that spider, and here's a Spider-Man outfit you can wear if you choose to accept that destiny. So it turns out...
So this is my confusion. So he traveled forward in time.
Yes.
To hand out these artifacts. Okay.
Yeah, this is my understanding of what happened. So when the Makers Council framed Tony for the terrorist attack, they also attempted to kill him, but without a second to think, he jumped 6 months into the future. And from there, he's been sending these totems back in time to the different heroes. So he's hoping that when the timeline catches up to him in 6 months, he'll come back to Earth and it'll be filled with heroes like Spider-Man and others. So this happened last night. We're just finding out about it, which means it's been weighing on Peter Parker all day. I've got a radioactive spider back home. Do I let it bite me? Do I accept my destiny? What do you think he does? This is Peter Parker we're talking about. He'll never turn down power. He lets the spider bite him. Then he becomes Spider-Man. And that's the only glimpse of Spider-Man we get this issue besides the cover. So we already talked about what we thought, some of our thoughts as we went, but kind of summarize, Daniel, your overall impressions, especially somebody, like you said, you barely ever read comics.
Yeah, I really liked it. I'm excited. Do these come out like every 2 weeks?
Comics typically come out monthly, and I think this is going to be on a monthly schedule, which means Gil Reads Comics will be on a monthly schedule.
Yeah, I'm excited to do the next Gil Reads Comics episode. Yeah, I thought this was a cool story. I'm excited to see where it goes.
Yeah, I kind of said a lot of what I wanted to say. The main thing I loved about it is that it takes its time. It's very grounded. It develops the characters. And even in the course of this one issue, just in telling us who they are, there's a ton of emotional and dramatic weight to it. I will admit that when it comes to comics, I have a bit of a blind spot for dialogue. When I watch a movie or a TV show, even if I like it, every once in a while, I'll roll my eyes at a line of dialogue or think nobody actually talks like that in the real world. And that was a big criticism of the original Ultimate Spider-Man. It was written by Brian Michael Bendis, and he was accused of trying to write in a sort of teenager way that didn't sound authentic, but I never saw it. For some reason, in comic form, I'm kind of blind to it. And so I tried to be objective and ask myself, is the dialogue realistic in this issue? And the one complaint I could see people having is that so many of the lines are melodramatic. Like, Peter, you lost your parents and you know the pain of that. So you know the pain I'm going through. There were so many of those really dramatic lines that I wonder if you read it with more objective eyes, would you say that it feels a little soap opera-ish or a tad melodramatic?
I do feel like, though, the comics are a different medium, and I almost read them as like it's like excerpts from dialogue, you know? Like, my assumption isn't I'm seeing the whole conversation. I'm seeing like the really powerful bits that matter. So I don't know. For that reason, I kind of give it a pass, and I like those lines. I thought they were good.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, if it works, it works.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, it worked. I also just think we kind of touched on this, but tonally, I love what they do because they do a great job of making it feel like such a bleak reality, such a dark world, but you have these heartwarming and optimistic characters that aren't unrealistically hopeful where it feels naive or cheesy. So it actually, what you want is a big contrast between the evil, awful darkness and the heroic characters. You want to create as much contrast as you can while maintaining realism, and I feel like they did such a good job of that. Feels very genuine.
Yeah. One other thing we didn't talk about, I loved the MJ Peter Parker relationship. I thought that also came through like really well in the comic. Like all the relationships of all the characters like really got me invested.
Yeah, you get the feeling that if this was a Marvel movie, when he's like, I want to have this spider bite me, everybody would be like, you've got children, you irresponsible fool. Think about me. And they would just be crapping on him the whole time. I got the same feeling when I watched Gremlins recently, and the dad character in that movie is a failed inventor. All of inventions are horrible, but everyone's so supportive. His family's like, give it another shot. The next one will be great. And you just don't see a lot of that support these days. So it was a breath of fresh air. The one thing I'll say that worries me a little is it feels like a very grounded story. Then a hologram from the future shows up and gives Peter a spider from the past. And it just feels like this convoluted, multiversal, big picture stuff that I don't want in this story. And it's like I said earlier, I kind of wish they just said, reboot, new story about Spider-Man. We don't need an in-continuity explanation for a reboot. But so far, it hasn't played a big role in it. And if they can, and I think the maker is going to come back, so Peter is going to get pulled into some bigger story. I hope they can deal with that mess and then kind of move on and just give us stories about Peter that, like I said, feel grounded and don't constantly tie into the Tony Stark, the Makers Council. Like, I'll be happy if we don't see Tony at all in the next issue.
Hey, why would you say that about Tony?
Tony, I want to see you in every issue. Any other thoughts, Daniel?
No, I'm excited for the next one and the next episode of Gil Reads Comics.
All right, that wraps up this month's episode of Gil Reads Comics.